Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Paquette, and welcome back to Our World of Darkness, where we will be continuing today with Chicago by Night, Chapter 3, Part B, The Marks. 21-1.3 Criminal Defacement of Property. A person commits criminal defacement of property when the person knowingly damages the property of another by defacing, deforming, or otherwise damaging the property by the use of paint or any similar substance, or by the use of a writing instrument, etching tool, or any other similar device. It is an affirmative defense to the violation of this section that the owner of the property damage consented to such damage. Illinois Statutes, Chapter 720. Spray paint was invented in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. In 1992, the Chicago City Council decided to outright ban the sale and distribution of all spray-based paints within the city limits. To take away supposed weapons of terror, as the aldermen colorfully referred to them, sales of aerosol paint was banned, causing city-wide outrage within business and art communities. The law was contested and eventually even made its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where it was upheld. While recently there have been rumblings of allowing the sale of these paints to adults, there's still no end to this ban in sight. This law pushed Chicago kindred to think of marks much differently. While it's still possible to go right outside the Chicago border into the surrounding suburbs and pick up some spray paint, it is mildly inconvenient. Younger kindred still get paint shipped to their havens through online transactions. Nevertheless, the ban has pushed kindred to become more creative with their marks in and around Chicago. Because of the ban, people have found new and more novel ways of tagging an area. One of the more popular ways has been etching into mirrors in public establishments. This provides a silvery white effect over the glass. Kindred often provide marks of control or warnings on mirrors. The effect has been used on outside mirrored windows of buildings, as well to provide ownership of territories or buildings. Murals are a huge part of the art scene in certain neighborhoods in Chicago. This is where a business is either asked, paid, or coerced into allowing a side of their building to be used as a canvas for a large piece of artwork. These murals often connect to the inhabitants and culture of a neighborhood, perhaps having aspects of religious connotations, ethnic backgrounds, or local folklore. Canaanites often integrate their own secret language into large paintings in subtle or not so subtle ways. Blue bars. The bands of blue on the Chicago flag stand for Lake Michigan, the north and the south branches of the Chicago rivers, and the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. The lake and river are both natural bodies of water the people of Chicago have bent to their will, yet could not survive without. Lake Michigan supplies tap water to the larger Chicagoland area, and Chicagoans have engineered the river to flow backwards downstate to St. Louis to get rid of sewage. Chicagoans shape the forces of nature. But even with that level of power, there's just some things they cannot do. Scarcity drives ingenuity. While storytellers want players to have the best experience they can, conflict builds storylines. The conflict in the city of Chicago often comes from the players interacting with and relating to the environment. As much as characters may want to change the environment of a city, there are some things simply out of their control. The spirit of the city. Some places are just special. They provide levels of nostalgia or connection on the almost spiritual level. This deep connection to the land, or lack thereof, can help bring definition to humans and vampires. A city like Chicago just has certain je ne sais quoi, an indefinable trait, or energy that flows through all major metropolitan areas. Be it a mixture of culture and people or the earth under it, every city has a spirit, and that spirit has occasionally act upon its own to produce serendipitous convergences. To reflect this, we have created the Spirit of the City system. This system can enhance and build elements of the story to provide the distinct flavor a city needs. You can use the provided tables here for your Chicago by Night Chronicle, or make your own. All one needs is a location, a given number of sudden events, and a corresponding number of successful outcomes and failures. These tables, starting on page 349, don't need to be utilized in every experience. Sometimes people in Kindred can just go out and get a pack of smokes. Sometimes driving to your local club is completely mundane. There are those nights, though, when seemingly anything that can happen will happen. These tables help storytellers and players make more interactive and provide a deeper, richer experience with the environment. They may also cause a bit of conflict within the coterie, provide machinations of enemies and jumping off points for stories within your city environment. The Spirit of the City system is simple to implement into your game. Take 2 dice and designate one the city die and the other your luck die. It is optimal who initiates this system of play. It can either the player or the storyteller. Roll 2 die. The city die will determine the situation in which the PCs are involved, and the luck die will provide whether it will be a success or failure. Successes being results of 6 and above. This system can be used to speed up situational gameplay or slow it down to make sections of story kick in. If used, the players and storytellers should be able to initiate rolls to their woe or benefit. If a failure occurs, storytellers may initiate a win at a cost deliberation. Remember, both players and storytellers can suggest a cost for this success, though it should never play out to be beneficial, as the success provides by the Spirit of the City system. These quotes associated with the success and failure on the tables provide jumping off points for situations. Feel free to modify or change them for your chronicle's use. Note, modifiers and disadvantages conveyed through the Spirit of the City are temporary, with the storyteller determined duration, unless specified otherwise. Modifiers can be made permanent if experience points are used to purchase them. or relationships detailed are cultivated in the story. Many of these bonuses are left dubious to account for different character origins, dispositions, and behaviors. The avenues of Chicago. Driving to north Driving south to north through Chicago on a good night is usually a harrowing experience due to traffic, potential hijackings, street violence, and dilapidated neighborhoods as scenery, let alone on a bad night or when being chased. These are some situations that may occur when on the Chicago roads. All failures may initiate a drive roll to come to a resolution, or players may take the next logical conclusion of the storyline if they wish. See table on page 349. The block. As seen earlier, the homesteading section, a city block can become a setting for an entire chronicle of Vampire the Masquerade. This table provides some situations that occur in buildings, your relationship with the block of your haven, or one of your coterie members' blocks. See table on page 349. The occult scene. The Chicago occult scene is deep. There are many traditions, temples, and shops that dot the city. Then there are the not so open locations and circles that practice around the city that you or your coterie may have interrupted. See table on page 350. The Underworld. There's crime everywhere throughout Chicago and in a multitude of shades and a variety of focuses. These are some of the random acts of criminality you can experience in Chicago. See table on page 350. Dragoon. These are massive influence actions that completely change the evening and unlife of a vampire. They are to be used sparingly and with caution, as they can completely create or upend a storyline. See table on page 351. People, person. Sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. Sometimes you know the right words to say. Sometimes you're respected as a fellow worker. Chicagoans tend to look out for one another, and sometimes you get lucky and people just like you. Then there are those nights where you couldn't say the right thing if it was plastered on the forehead of the person to whom you're talking. See table on page 352. The collar counties. The Chicago collar counties are restless. Wild spaces filled with seemingly random horrors. While they embody the malaise of suburban life, they also hold enough space where these same abominations, if not looked at directly, can seemingly pass as normal, everyday humans. The chittering, mirthful laughter coming from the forest preserve is often just taken as coyotes celebrating a kill. The cold pouring out from the cornfield behind a subdivision is chalked up to funky geothermal stuff or mechanical weirdness. The rumor of the remnants of a world's first thermonuclear reactor being buried in the local forest and now leaking quickly into the water supply is just an urban legend, right? See table on page 353. Smoke and mirrors. This table consists of problems of only kindred would walk into in the city of Chicago. Storytellers can use this table after feeding scenes to see if their player gains negative effects from the blood they consumed, or to see if they will have a random encounter later in the game session. Use this table discreetly before the game session to see what will happen. And remember, there is always cause for these problems. They don't randomly occur. Perhaps there is some vampire inviting economic suffering on the kind in the area. Perhaps a corporation is leaking chemicals into the local water supply. Or there are other Canaanites around not cleaning up after themselves. Whatever the problem is, it provides depth of story to give this information to your players. See table on page 353. Elysia. Elysia are gathering locations for the city's kindred to gather and socialize. It often devolves into backroom dealings, backstabbing, but kindred cannot help but mingle with their own kind. Elysium represents peace and vampire society, a rarity anywhere else. See table on page 354. Dignitaries and debutantes. Kindred of note. Run the gamut of prince to herald and Camarilla sheriff to Sabbat Templar. Your interactions with them can lead to opportunities and the formation of fresh rivalries. See the table on page 355. Red stars. The flag of Chicago has 4 red stars in the center. In the center white bar, representing special events or locations within the city's history. The points of the flag have specific meanings as well, from bragging rights, virtues, aspects of power, and the political entities Chicago has belonged to in the past. This section reflects the same design, but at special locations within the city, or aspects of the city, and how they work. These places hold essential value to the kindred of the city and are protected as much as possible. A malaise has been running rampant through the city as of late. No one really knows who is behind it or how they're orchestrating it. Places of cultural import have been shutting down or get closed seemingly for no reason at all. These are all locations and services that have been long loved by the communities of both kindred and kind, yet they are all shuttered. There seems to be no rhyme or reason for the closures. At first, the Toreador blamed the Nosferatu, but then some of their holdings were also closed, and their human pawns disappeared as well. It has caused a level of unease among the Chicago kindred, as they don't know who or what will be struck next. So far, the city has lost Q101 and 97.9, the Loop rock radio stations. Yet the former was resurrected with the help of some local brouhaha. A string of famous club closures, such as Touche and Jackhammer, rock the LGBTQ1A plus community. Is it IA? I apologize if I offend. The Alley, an international recognized outlet for counterculture clothes and items, even closed for the brief time. Neo, Chicago's premier goth and industrial club, locked its doors along with the Double Door, one of Chicago's remaining independent music venues. Countless other institutions have fallen to this cultural recession. In a city as large as Chicago, things close all the time, so it hasn't really garnered anything other than collective groans of apathy, nostalgia, or sadness from the kind populace. Kindred, however, continue to worry over the seemingly random destruction of their areas of influence. Elysia. The practice of Elysium was not particularly important to Kindred when the first few centuries of development in the New World. It was a simpler time when rules were looser and vampires often existed hundreds of miles apart from one another. With the building of larger metropolitan areas, the need arose for reverence of cultural bastions, along with the protection from the rise of the sporadic anarch rebellions. Loudon first declared Elysium within the city of Chicago in the early 20th century, and it's stuck in various important Chicago sites since then. The need for common neutral ground and protected locations has never been greater than these modern nights. With the anarchs once again swinging and the Sabbat devolving to greater savagery than before, Chicago Kindred community has stood behind the traditions of Elysium when they could find very little to agree upon elsewhere. The remaining elders in the city and the Primogen Council still put their weight behind the protection of the locations of their assets. Even vampires as ancient and monstrous as Helena or Jason Newberry respect Elysium most of the time. Anarchs believe in the practice as well, as it provides them a common space to try to gain allies or sympathizers and meet to discuss concerns common to all kindred. Importantly, the Act of Elysia allows the Lasamra to reach out and meet other kindred in a safe location. The tradition is strictly adhered to these nights, and fiercely interpreted, with little mercy to offenders. Yet the lack of Elysium in certain locations of the city also call to the more sinister urges of the damned. The Laws of Elysium. First set down by the former Prince Loudon, these 4 laws have been recently redeclared by the new Prince and Primogen Council. These rules are left intentionally vague for the ease of use and manipulation by elders of the city. There is a communal set of oral traditions that resemble presented among the Camarilla elders and the keepers officers. A running issue in Chicago involves the caitiff anarch Victoria Longwood, who tagged the alley wall of the Blue Velvet Club with graffiti to help other anarchs find the location. Though seized by Damien, the sheriff, she explained she tagged the club because the use of internet was outright banned by the Camarilla. The court officers have argued back and forth for months over whether Longwood should be punished for damaging Elysium or rewarded for finding a new way to advertise its presence. After all, she was signposting the Blue Velvet for its intended purpose. Currently, Longwood exists staked and in torpor somewhere in the city, while the court debates her fate. 1. On pain of a blood hunt, no violence is permitted on the premises against kindred, kind, or property. This rule is rather simple in depiction, yet complicated in practice. What exactly is violence? Kindred in the past have accused others of use of the subtler disciplines as an act of violence, and found in the right by elders. But it also well known that if you don't get caught, the court is none the wiser. 2. Elysium is to be considered neutral ground. No conflict of any sort among kindred may be carried onto its sacred grounds. This is quite a hypocrisy, as most kindred hold age-old grudges against each other. Yet conflict is frowned upon, and open acts of hostility are most definitely a breach of etiquette. Therefore, it is encouraged that all Cainites do everything within their power to bolster their willpower before entering Elysium. 3. Access shall not be limited. All Cainites are welcome. This rule is one of the most contentious in modern nights, I apologize. With the mass exodus of kindred from the Camarilla, many members wish to scrap this rule for the new anarchs. Cooler heads prevailed, as Elysium is considered above all political views. This law has also been incredibly helpful to the La Sombra with their recent attempts at transition. 4. One should not attract attention as one leaves and enters Elysium. Subtlety has always been celebrated within the Ivory Tower. This rule is the most flexible, as the majority of kindred who attend Elysium love to put on airs of power and grace. Entrances into buildings have at times been modified into grand productions, especially by some of the more aesthetically minded kindred. Attention from kind has always been frowned upon, especially in mind of the city's press corps. The Rack. The Rack of Chicago has moved around and expanded over the years. While it used to be the center around Rush Street, it has since grown to encompass Wicker Park, Wriggleville, and Boys Town. The Rack has also changed in approach over the years. While it still holds the most opportunity for feeding, it has been declared open market to all vampires in the city if they use discretion and are cognizant of the masquerade during their feedings. Territory and special feeding grounds have only been made available to citizens who have been declared deserving by the office of the Prince and the Primogen Council. While the Rack holds plentiful feeding opportunities, it also is looked down upon as a location for making a haven. Its dubious reputation for petty crime and public intoxication tends to turn away the elitist attitudes of the Camarilla, and the chaotic nature of the location makes some anarchs nervous. As a situation there can quickly escalate. It is mostly inhabited by fledglings or neonates who are earning their fangs. Yet, in a pinch, it is often used as a quick bite and sip for all kindred in Chicago. In the recent past, the CPD has taken a relaxed view of public intoxication and marijuana use. While anyone being rowdy will still be swept into the police car, if you're keeping to yourself, you tend not to find confrontation. The same goes for kindred within this location when dealing with the Chicago Police Department in this area. If your character succeeds on a difficulty 3 resolve plus etiquette roll, you gain +1 die to all social rolls with them for the remainder of the story. That's nice. Sorry to break it, but that's nice. The cops remember you. Any belligerent behavior immediately provides -2 dice modifier to all rolls dealing with the Chicago police for the story's duration. The Rack has the largest number of bars within the city, and with the advent of the microbrewery, even more people have returned to this area to drink. The music scene around the Rack is also booming, with a multitude of underground rock, hip-hop, and electronica venues popping up all over these neighborhoods. The party scene is extremely vibrant, providing +1 die to all attempts on appearing human. As the lively nature of the proceedings infects even the undead, there is also an unfortunate penchant for bravado and fighting. Kindred suffer -1 die on awareness rolls. It's interesting. The Succubus Club. The one famed destination for the denizens of Chicago nightclub scene, the Succubus Club, closed its doors in the late 1990s. Declining sales, the aftermath of the Lupine assaults, and the changes of culture were often cities by local papers. Been cited by local papers and magazines for the famous edgy nightclub's demise. The local NPR stations, WBEZ, even did a sound opinions piece recently remembering the goth scene of the past Chicago and taking note of its influence that were felt worldwide. That is, at least, the story as the public knows it. In the last year, the Succubus Club reopened. At first, exclusively to kindred, but now to kine as well. The Succubus Club's owners remain anonymous to the public at large, adding an air to mystery to the club. That spawned dozens of imitators, a few successful franchises, and even a wandering pop-up clone, but none are quite as successful as the real thing. These nights, the club is once again the place to be for Camarilla Kindred. The Succubus is a multi-level club containing a dance floor, 4 bars, a stage, a DJ booth, balconies, elevated walkways, and VIP suites, all in the main chamber alone. The club has received extensive renovations, though whether the money came from the prince, the owner, or some other benefactor is unknown. Deeper into the clubs are 2 galleries, a spa, a cigar and whiskey lounge, and further private rooms for VIP occupancy. The uppermost floor is completely soundproofed from activities below and is usually reserved for string quartets and opera singers. The ceiling of this floor is made from glass, revealing the night sky up above it. Between this floor and those below are the offices of the mortals and possibly immortal staff. Buried beneath the venue's wine and beer cellars are the remains of the old Succubus Club in storage, and the basement maze used exclusively by Kindred for secret talks and exciting hunts. If a mortal sneaks into this far down, if a mortal sneaks this far down, they're unlikely to return with memory of their journey. The Succubus Club rivals the Blue Velvet and Red Number 5 as the most popular Kindred-run bars in Chicago. What the other two have in class, live music, and aesthetic, the Succubus Club makes up for in nostalgia. The club sees visitors of all ages and all sex, where the Blue Velvet predominantly caters to the elites, and the Red Number 5 appeals mainly to outsiders. All social interactions with kind within the Succubus Club gain +2 dice to the environment is specially designed to create an aura of warmth and passion within human occupants. The Hive. The Loop is the financial and economic heart of the city of Chicago. During the day, it is awash with humanity, going this way and that, to careers and life events. During the evening, a more refined, polished clientele descend upon the upscale bars, fronted by mixologists and followed by expensive dinners. The Hive, what Kindred call the Loop, is the center of the city, and from where all city life flows outward. The Hive holds most of the city's offices and Cook County buildings, courthouse, the 3 major train stations, and the multitude of Elysia. This area is the most heavily populated by tourists, as it holds most of the scenic locations of the city. It also contains a plethora of plain-looking office buildings and the most notable and well-known skyscrapers. There's also an academic stronghold along Congress Avenue, as it holds both the Washington Library and multiple universities. This is also where the Broadway of Chicago is considered to be located. The Hive is often considered a model of the overall city itself and is a good gauge for the wellness of the city. It is also firmly under the control of the Venture and Toreador clans. The Malkavian clans, via Primogen Newberry, has recently asked for feeding rights on the L lines that run through this part of the city, but their request has yet been granted. The Malkavians have always been given a wide berth by the officers of the city, allowing them to feed and come and go as they please due to their mistakenly perceived fragile natures. All performances, academics, and finance roles in this area gain +1 die due to the highest levels of access and opportunity built into the neighborhood. Any larceny and drive roles are at a -1 die due to the heavy police presence and throngs of tourists. The L. There are few things Chicagoans connect more to madness than commuting. Travel in the city can be tough at times, but it is better than other cities, at least according to new outlets. Chicago's elevated train, or the L, is no exception. Lines stretch and meander all over the city, and those in charge have recently been given the go-ahead to expand even further. They all converge in the cities wrapping around the hive in some sort of delightful spiderweb around the city. This may be why the Malkavians of the city are fond of the L. Within the last 5 years, the administration and mayor's office decided to shut down over half of the city's mental health facilities, effectively crippling the city's safety net for some of its neediest citizens. With no end in sight to the city proclaiming a practice of small center and home care for the mentally ill, those suffering often find themselves homeless without care and falling through the cracks of society. An easy and cheap way to get out of the often harsh Chicago weather, be it brutal summers, biting winters, is to ride the L around the city. There has been a recent uptick in the train-related suicides in Chicago. Numbers have been spotty at best and not released publicly, but it is often reported in the local news traffic reports, as is affects morning and evening commute times. Those touched with differentiation of mental and cognizant ability fascinate the city's Malkavians. They often gather ghouls or groom new childer from those experiencing the city in constant motion. Get off the red line before 9 p.m. is a common bit of advice given to young Chicagoans by their family members. Perhaps there is some merit to this advice. All dominate roles gain +1 die when they use on Chicago's elevated train system. Be it the claustrophobic nature of the cars, or some of their occult manifestations. The trains lend themselves to hysteria and lunacy. Due to the paranoia many train commuters suffer into the night, there's an infectious -1 die roll to all rolls when on board the L. Letter to Lester from Edith. Dear Lester, your masters are not mine. Yours are within the earth, and mine are within the water. Are they of the same brood? The same family, perhaps? I do not know. But kindly refrain from casting aspirations against the Collivars. We have nothing to do with your feeding problem. Mother's blessings, Edith. Chicago Pedway. A series of underground tunnels and overhead bridges weave through the heart of the hive, connecting most of the buildings. This area was only recently completed and was immediately grabbed as territory by the Nosferatu via Primogen Khalid. Khalid, yes. Bolstered by the loss of the shadier parts of the lower Wacker Drive in the rebuilding and revising of the city at the turn of the century, the Nosferatu made the calculated decision to push for this territory. The territorial disputes over the Pedway have been a point of conflict with the Ventru, who own and operate large number of buildings to which the pedway is connected. Through the trading of boons, unrequested support of the Catif and Thin Bloods in this endeavor, the backroom deals, the Nosferatu seem to firmly control this location. This situation has given some hope to Catif and Thin Blood, who exist under the heels of the Ventru clan. This fragile grouping of allies has literally pulled the ground out from underneath the kings of Chicago. Though, there surely will be retribution coming in later nights. All stealth rolls within the pedway gain +1 die due to the transient and shady nature, with presence rolls suffering a -1 die. This location is not one for grandstanding, but for moving on and moving quickly. The Far East Side. Most Chicagoans don't realize the city goes as far south as it does. The east side of Chicago stretches across the lakefront beaches, the museum campus, and a handful of neighborhoods. In some places, it falls only a few blocks away from the state of Indiana. A more industrial portion of the city, the east side, is a hard-knock working-class area containing large portion of old and new anarch buildings. This area of the city holds the majority of brouhaha turf and assets, being in direct access to the museums, University of Chicago, and tougher neighborhoods like Hedwich and the neighborhood by the same East Side moniker. The Nosferatu enjoy the vacant or abandoned industrial areas provided here. This side also holds many of the city's Catif and Thin Bloods, who are often left to their own devices and openly threatened by the more righteous members of the Camarilla. In the late 1980s, the manufacturing heart of the city was in the east side of Chicago. There were plentiful labor incentives, jobs that paid incredibly well and pushed America and Chicago forward. Then, after a series of trade deals and massive economic shifts caused in part by Ballard's interdiction, all the steel mill and manufacturing jobs disappeared overnight. This economic vacuum caused extensive damage across the mortal populace of the area. This part of the city simply never recovered, and after almost being demolished for an airport by the Daley regime, seemed to freeze in time, brooding with a mixture of industrial parks and refined spaces. This area provides a +1 die to all intimidation rolls when dealing with mortal populace. It also takes on a contemptuous nature of the lake, bad weather causing monstrous waves to crash onto the shores of Lake Michigan. When such weather occurs, all kindred on the east side have a -1 die to resist frenzy. It's a long chapter. The end. Steve's Lounge, 13200 South Baltimore Avenue. Built in 1958, Steve's has been a local staple in the east side neighborhood of Hedwich since its opening, hosting events from baptisms to weddings to wakes. This tiny dance hall and bar has been held family gatherings encompassing the entire lives and deaths of Chicago citizens for over half a century. Known for supporting neighborhood clientele and cultural tastes such as local Friday fish fry, a big to do in heavy Catholic neighborhoods, the Polish sausage. It contains 2 dance halls, a stage, and a little bar where sleepy pensioners drink their days away. This bar style has been slowly disappearing from the Chicago scene for years, partly due to the changing tastes, but also rumored to some other, more malicious influence. But Steve's withstands the tides of change. The hall, when not holding family gatherings, is often rented out to vampires of a local anarch movement, a perfect location run by mortals who keep to themselves. This dance hall area has become a war room of sorts for meetings where they plan advancements of the anarch cause. Being an underground marketplace of kindred ideas, this location provides +1 die to all insight, persuasion, and technology rolls. And I think that we will continue the South Side in Part C of the Chapter 3 reading of Vampire the Masquerade Chicago by Night for 5th edition. Good evening.